At my promotion dinner, my sister took my husband's hand and said I'm pregnant. They expected me to break down and give them half my wealth in the divorce. Instead, I pulled out an envelope they never knew existed. Their faces turned ghost white. You know, there are these moments in your life, the ones that feel like they're shot in golden hour, where everything is perfect, warm, and just full of promise. In those moments, you believe you truly know the people closest to you. You believe that no matter what problems you might have, there are certain fundamental lines, certain sacred trusts, that would simply never be crossed. Well, I used to think so, too. My name is Meredith. I was 29 years old when my world fell apart, and this is the story of how I learned that some people, even the ones who share your blood, will do absolutely anything to get what they want. It all started on a crisp Thursday in March, a day that was supposed to be one of the best of my life. I had just come out of a marathon meeting with the executive board. After 4 long, grueling years of working 60-hour weeks, of sacrificing weekends and holidays as a project manager at a major tech firm here in Austin, Texas, they had finally given me the news. I was being promoted to commercial director. It was everything I had worked for. The title, the responsibility, the corner office. I couldn't stop smiling all day, feeling a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. The first people I called, my voice bubbling with excitement, were my husband, Russell, and my younger sister, Brenda. They were my world, the 2 people I wanted to share this victory with more than anyone. "We're celebrating tonight," I announced into the phone, practically bouncing in my desk chair. The Gilded Steer. My treat. The Gilded Steer was that classic, upscale steakhouse downtown, the kind of place with dark wood paneling, deep leather booths, and waiters in starched white coats. It was the kind of place where a single steak costs more than a week's worth of groceries, a symbol of a world I had fought tooth and nail to enter. But tonight, I could afford it. Tonight, I had earned it. I arrived at the restaurant first, feeling a thrill of anticipation. I was wearing a brand new navy blue dress, a silk sheath that Russell always said made my eyes pop. I'd bought it specifically for an occasion like this. I chose a quiet corner booth, a secluded little nook where we could have some privacy for our celebration. The dining room was buzzing with the low, confident hum of conversation from executives closing deals and elegant couples on expensive dates. For the first time, I felt like I truly belonged in that room. Then I saw them arrive, and a little knot of unease tightened in my stomach. They walked in together. Brenda was absolutely radiant, beaming with a brilliant, almost manic smile I hadn't seen on her face in a long, long time. And Russell. Russell just looked nervous. He was a car salesman at a Lincoln dealership, charming and good-looking, but he always got a bit uncomfortable in places like this, fidgeting with his tie as if it were choking him. But there was something different about him that night. A tension in his shoulders, a darting look in his eyes that I couldn't quite name. "Congratulations on the promotion, Mayor." Brenda enveloped me in a hug, her arms squeezing me with a strange, almost desperate effusiveness. She was never the demonstrative type, especially not with me. It felt rehearsed. Still, I pushed the feeling down, determined to let nothing spoil my perfect night, eager to share my happiness with the 2 people I loved most in the world. We settled into the booth, the rich smell of aged beef and old money hanging in the air. We ordered a bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, a $200 bottle I'd been wanting to try for ages. As the waiter poured the deep red liquid into our glasses, I launched into my news, my words tumbling out in a rush of pure joy. "You won't believe the portfolio they're giving me," I began, my eyes shining. "I'll be handling the entire European expansion. It's a 40% salary increase, not even counting the performance bonuses. We can finally start looking at houses, Russell. A real house, with a backyard." I looked at him, expecting to see his handsome face break into a wide grin. But he just stared down at his glass, swirling the wine, his expression unreadable. I turned to Brenda, trying to recapture the excitement. "And Brenda, I was thinking, with the extra money, I could finally help you with a down payment on a little studio of your own. Get you out of that cramped apartment." As I talked, painting this beautiful picture of our future, a future I thought we would all share. I started to notice how strange their silence was. Brenda was listening with an unnerving intensity, her eyes wide, hanging on my every single word about my new salary. It wasn't pride I saw in her eyes, it was something else, something sharp and hungry. Russell, on the other hand, couldn't sit still. He just kept folding and unfolding his heavy linen napkin, his knuckles white with tension. He hadn't said more than 2 words since they'd sat down. The festive atmosphere I had imagined was curdling into something heavy and suffocating. Actually, Brenda interrupted me, her voice cutting through my excited rambling like a shard of ice. We have some news to share, too. She reached across the heavy oak table, her movements slow and deliberate, and took Russell's hand. My stomach didn't just drop. It plummeted. It felt like the floor had just fallen out from under me, sending me into a cold, dark freefall. The cheerful buzz of the restaurant suddenly faded into a distant, muffled roar, like I was underwater. The warm, golden lights of the chandelier above us seemed to flicker and dim. I couldn't take my eyes off her hand, her perfectly manicured fingers lacing through my husband's, a gesture of ownership, of intimacy that felt like a physical blow. I'm pregnant, she said, her voice clear and steady, laced with a note of pure triumph. The world stopped. Literally. It was a punch to the gut that knocked all the air from my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at their linked hands. Pregnant. My sister, Brenda, was pregnant. I know this is a complicated situation, Russell finally spoke, his voice raspy, barely a whisper. He still couldn't look at me, his gaze fixed on a spot on the tablecloth. But it just happened, Meredith. We fell in love. They both watched me then, their faces a bizarre mixture of nervous expectation and a poorly disguised, smug satisfaction. It was as if they were waiting for the explosion. They wanted me to scream, to cry, to throw a drink in his face, to make a scene that would give the other tables something juicy to whisper about over their creme brulee. They wanted a drama, and I was meant to be the hysterical star. But I couldn't do anything but stare. My sister. My little sister, Brenda, the one I had helped pay for college when our parents couldn't swing it, was sitting there, holding my husband's hand, pregnant with his child. And they had chosen to tell me this, here, tonight, on the night of my greatest professional achievement. It wasn't a confession. It was a calculated, cruel execution. My voice came out strangely calm, a stranger's voice, devoid of any emotion. How long? I managed to ask. Brenda's smile was victorious as she placed her free hand over her still flat stomach. 3 months, she replied. It started right after your birthday last year. My birthday. 3 months. 3 months of whispered phone calls, of secret meetings, of them laughing behind my back while I worked 12-hour days to get this promotion. This promotion I was so desperate to share with the very people who were gleefully destroying my life. On the silent, 20-minute drive home, the neon city lights of Austin blurring through my unshed tears, my mind became a frantic projector, flashing through years of little moments, little comments, little slights that suddenly clicked into place like a key turning in a lock. Brenda had always lived in my shadow, and now I realized it hadn't just bothered her, it had consumed her. It had festered into a corrosive envy that had poisoned everything between us. I was the older daughter, the responsible one, the one who got good grades without seeming to try. She was the youngest, the spoiled one, the one our parents shielded from every hardship, always making excuses for her failures. But for some reason, it was never enough for her. We grew up in a modest, middle-class family in San Antonio. Our dad was a CPA, our mom a third-grade teacher. We never wanted for anything essential, but Brenda always acted like she was entitled to so much more. She truly believed she deserved the things I had, the success, the recognition, the money, just without putting in any of the backbreaking effort. To her, my success wasn't a result of hard work, it was about luck, or favoritism, or some cosmic injustice that gave me everything and left her with the scraps. I remembered the day I got my full scholarship to the University of Texas. While my parents were bursting with pride, Brenda had just sniffed and said, "Well, of course you did. You always have that kind of luck." When I graduated with honors and landed a great internship at a multinational firm, her comment was a backhanded, "You've always known how to sell yourself." It wasn't a compliment, it was an accusation. The most telling memory was from 5 years ago, right after I bought my first condo. I was 25, bursting with pride over my first piece of real estate. I'd invited the family over to see it. While my parents marveled at the high ceilings and the small balcony, Brenda walked through the rooms with a critical eye. She ran her hand over the granite countertops I had been so proud of. "This must have cost a fortune," she'd said, her voice laced with something I mistook for awe, but now recognized as resentment. "Aren't you worried about being a little too ambitious, Mare? It's a long way to fall." Our parents, bless their hearts, had always tried to even things out in a way that only made it worse. When I bought my new, reliable Ford Fusion with my first big bonus, they scraped together enough to buy her a 10-year-old used one, just so she wouldn't feel left out. When my salary started to climb into the 6 figures, they increased the money they secretly gave her to help with her rent. It was like they were trying to artificially compensate for my success by keeping her afloat, which only fueled her toxic sense of entitlement. Now, her constant, probing questions about my finances made a sickening kind of sense. "So, what's the interest rate on a mortgage like this?" she'd ask when she visited. "What's your salary now, anyway?" "I'm just trying to get a benchmark for the freelance market," she'd lie, as if her sporadic graphic design gigs were in the same universe as my corporate career. When I mentioned I was investing in stocks, she wanted to know specific amounts, which funds I was in. It wasn't sisterly curiosity. It was reconnaissance. It was pure, unadulterated greed, and I had been too blind, too trusting, to see it. And Russell, poor, simple, easily led Russell. When I first introduced him to my family, Brenda had made it a point to pull me aside and say he wasn't my type. Now I knew why. He wasn't her type, either, he was just her tool. He was her way in. He was the weak link she could exploit to get to what she really wanted, my life. I unlocked the door to my condo and stepped inside. The silence was deafening. The air was thick with the ghost of the life I thought I had. It was bizarre how your entire world could detonate and the physical space around you could remain so stubbornly, mockingly unchanged. Russell's worn-out running shoes were by the door. His favorite Dallas Cowboys mug was sitting on the counter. His toothbrush was still in the ceramic holder next to mine in the bathroom. Each object was a tiny, painful monument to a lie. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed I had picked out, the bed I had paid for, still in my navy blue dress and heels, and just stared into the void. My brain, my overachieving, problem-solving brain, had finally short-circuited. There was no plan, no strategy for this. I knew I should be crying, screaming, throwing his clothes out the window, but all I felt was a profound, hollow numbness, like my soul had been scooped out, leaving an empty shell. He didn't come home that night, of course. Around 2 a.m., my phone, which had been sitting silently on the nightstand, buzzed with a text. It was him. A coward's message. "I'm at Brenda's. We'll talk tomorrow." Brenda's. Not your sister's house. Brenda's. He called her place like it was his home now, a familiar destination. As if our 4 years of marriage, our shared life, were just an inconvenient detour on his way to her. As if I was the obstacle that had finally been removed. I spent the rest of the night awake, pacing the 1,200 square feet of the condo I'd bought with my own money, trying to understand how I could have been so blind. The signs were all there, weren't they? Russell working late more often in the last few months. Brenda suddenly calling more frequently, asking about my schedule under the guise of sisterly chatter. Them arriving at the restaurant together as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It all made a sickening kind of sense now. When the sun finally began to stream through the blinds, I was still sitting on the couch, my beautiful dress wrinkled, my makeup a smeared wreck. My phone showed 17 missed calls from my mother. Brenda, the master manipulator, had already called her, no doubt spinning some romanticized, tragic tale of star-crossed lovers who just couldn't help themselves. My mother's inevitable call came a few minutes later. "Meredith, honey," she began, her voice laced with a pained confusion. "Brenda told me, honey, these things are complicated. Love is a funny thing. And now there's a baby to think about." I cut her off. "Mom, I can't talk about this right now." I called my assistant, Simone, my voice a dead monotone. "I'm not coming in today." She knew better than to ask questions. She just said, "Take care of yourself, Meredith. You never miss work. Whatever it is, I hope you're okay." Under the hot spray of the shower, I finally broke. It wasn't a dramatic, movie-style breakdown, but the quiet, exhausted sobs of someone who had just lost the two people she thought she could trust most in the world. When I got out, I saw 3 texts from Brenda. "Mare, we need to talk. This wasn't how we wanted you to find out. I know it's hard, but we can resolve this like adults." I held my thumb over the screen and deleted the entire thread without a second thought. She didn't deserve a response. That evening, Russell showed up with an empty suitcase to get some of his things. He still had his key. The audacity of him letting himself into my home, the home he had betrayed, was staggering. He tried to explain himself while he packed, spewing the kind of empty clichés you hear in bad movies. "It wasn't planned, Mare. It just happened." As if betrayal were a sudden weather event, an act of God beyond his control. "Brenda was going through a tough time," he mumbled, stuffing shirts into his bag. "She needed someone to talk to." I watched him, a cold, hard clarity forming in my mind. The numbness was receding, replaced by a slow-burning, icy rage. "I'm going to find a lawyer," I said, my voice flat and final. He stopped packing and looked at me, a flicker of genuine panic in his eyes. The reality of consequences was beginning to dawn on him. "Mare, it doesn't have to be like this," he said quickly. "We can be civil. We can divide things fairly. No need to get lawyers involved and make it messy. Fairly." The word hung in the air, a monument to his delusion. After he left, the silence of the condo felt less like emptiness and more like a clean slate. I immediately called my best friend from college, Corinne. She wasn't just my friend, she was a shark of a family law attorney in Houston. I told her everything, my voice steady, relaying the facts without emotion. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Meredith, I am so sorry. But right now, we need to move past the emotion and get practical. I need you to gather every single financial document you have. Bank statements, deeds, tax returns, investment portfolios. Everything. You fought for what you have. You are not going to just hand over half of your life's work to the man who betrayed you with your own sister." Her words were a jolt of electricity. She was right. This was no longer just about a broken heart, it was about protecting my future. I walked into my home office, the one I'd meticulously set up in the second bedroom. I was a person who thrived on organization, on control. I pulled out my color-coded folders and started laying them out on the desk. I started with the green folder, labeled marriage documents. I pulled out our birth certificates, and then the official marriage certificate from Travis County. My eyes scanned the familiar document, but then they snagged on something I hadn't noticed or thought about in 4 years. A small, typed line at the bottom, just above the official seal, subject to the terms of the separate property agreement filed on this date. Separate property. The words echoed in my mind. Why did that sound so familiar? And then it hit me, a memory surfacing from a deep, dusty corner of my brain, a memory so clear it was like a lightning strike. A prenuptial agreement. We had a prenup. My heart started hammering against my ribs, a frantic, hopeful rhythm. I scrambled out of the office and ran to my bedroom closet, to the small, fireproof safe bolted to the floor in the back. It had been so long since I'd opened it that I fumbled with the combination, my fingers suddenly clumsy. My birthday, backward. Click. The heavy door swung open. And there it was. Nestled between the deed to the condo and my passport was a thick, sealed, legal-sized envelope from the Travis County Clerk's office. Prenuptial agreement. Meredith Wheeler and Russell Cole. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope. The hope was so intense it was painful. Maybe, just maybe, my younger, more cautious self had just saved me from my current nightmare. The memory came rushing back with the crisp, formal scent of the legal paper in my hands. It was a sun-drenched Saturday in April, 4 years ago, just 2 weeks before our wedding. I was 25 and on top of the world. I had just closed on my first condo, a modern 2-bedroom in a trendy part of downtown Austin. It was my first major asset, purchased with my own savings and a mortgage I qualified for on my own. Russell, meanwhile, was getting increasingly stressed about the wedding costs, which were, I had to admit, spiraling out of control. "Mare, are you absolutely sure we need all this?" he'd said one evening, gesturing helplessly at the vendor quotes spread across my kitchen table. $15,000 for catering? $8,000 for a photographer? That's more than I make in 4 months. He wasn't wrong. It was a lot of money, especially for him. He was making about $4,000 a month at the Lincoln dealership back then, a respectable income, but a world away from the $12,000 a month I was pulling in after a recent, substantial promotion. "Don't worry about it," I'd reassured him, putting my arms around his neck. "I'll cover the bulk of it. All that matters is that we're celebrating our love." It was in that context of our widening financial disparity that my lawyer at the time, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Dr. Williams, had suggested the prenup. She was handling the closing on my condo. "Meredith, listen to me," she'd said, peering at me over her glasses. "You're young, you're incredibly successful, and you're accumulating significant assets. A prenuptial agreement isn't about mistrust, it's about smart, sensible financial planning. It's just good business." When I brought it up with Russell that night, he literally laughed, a loud, barking sound that made him almost spit out his beer. "A prenup?" he scoffed. "Isn't that for celebrities and old billionaires who don't trust their trophy wives? We love each other, Mare. Our love doesn't need a contract. It's not about our love, Russell. It's just legal protection, for both of us," I had insisted gently. "It would just make me feel more secure." "If it's that important to you, then fine," he finally relented with a sigh, though he clearly thought I was being paranoid and overly dramatic. "But honestly, I think you're overcomplicating something that should be simple." We went to Dr. Williams's office on a Thursday morning. I remember the day with photographic clarity because Russell was miserably hungover. He'd been out with his work buddies for a last bachelor outing and had stumbled in late the night before. He showed up to the lawyer's office 15 minutes late, looking sleepy and irritable, complaining under his breath that he'd lost an important sale because of the appointment. He was more focused on his lost commission than the document that would define our financial future. Dr. Williams, a model of professionalism, explained the basic terms with the patience of a saint. "Complete separation of assets," she said, her gaze fixed mainly on Russell, trying to gauge his comprehension. "This means each of you maintains ownership of your individual property, both what you bring into the marriage and what you acquire during it. This agreement protects both of you. Do you understand?" Yeah. Got it. What's mine is mine, what's hers is hers, right?" "Makes sense," he'd said, nodding distractedly. He was already pulling out his phone, sneaking a look at his texts under the table. It made no sense at all that he'd actually understood, because Russell's eyes glazed over whenever I tried to talk about anything more complex than our monthly budget. He signed every page, all 15 pages of dense, single-spaced legal text, with the casual, hurried air of someone signing a delivery receipt. He didn't read a single word. He just wanted to get it over with so he could get back to the dealership. Driving back to my condo in my car, he'd put his hand on my knee and smiled. I still think this whole contract thing is kind of weird, he'd said. But if it makes you happy, that's all that matters. In 2 weeks, we'll be husband and wife. Forever. He truly hadn't understood a thing. To him, it was just another piece of bureaucratic paper, a meaningless formality on the path to the wedding. He had no idea that in his hungover, distracted state, he had just signed away any right to my present and my future fortune. And I, so blissfully in love and confident in our forever, didn't mind his lack of attention. The contract was just a formality we'd never, ever need. How tragically, beautifully wrong I was. Now, for years later, standing in the harsh light of my bedroom at 2 a.m, I finally understood the profound value of that rich people nonsense. I spread the pages of the contract out on my bed. The legal words that once seemed like dry, formal jargon now shone on the page like a sacred text, a declaration of my independence. I read each clause again, my heart pounding with a wild, triumphant rhythm. Clause 1, complete separation of property. Each spouse shall maintain individual ownership of all property owned prior to the marriage and, crucially, all property acquired during the marriage through individual effort, inheritance, or investment. During the marriage. My breath caught in my throat. That single phrase was my shield, my fortress. The condo I had bought before we were even married. The substantial investment portfolio I funded every single month from my own salary. The valuable stock options I received from my company as part of my compensation. The $50,000 stake in the tech startup I had bought 2 years ago with my bonus money. All of it. It was exclusively, unequivocally, and legally mine. I moved on to the next section, my eyes flying across the page. Clause 2, dissolution of marriage. In the event of dissolution of marriage, there shall be no division of separate property. Each party shall retain the entirety of their individual assets, and waive any and all claims to the assets of the other party. No division of property. He had no right to anything. Absolutely nothing. It was so clear, so absolute. I kept reading, my hands no longer trembling but steady, searching for a loophole, some obscure clause he could use against me, but there was none. Dr. Williams had drafted an ironclad, impenetrable fortress around my life's work. And then I saw it. The final, beautiful nail in the coffin of their greedy little plan. Clause 3, spousal support waiver. In consideration of the mutual waivers herein, both parties hereby knowingly and voluntarily waive any and all rights to spousal support, alimony, or maintenance from the other party, both temporary and permanent, in the event of a separation or divorce. Alimony. He had no right to ask me for a single penny of alimony. Considering the vast difference in our incomes, he would have been the one legally entitled to ask for financial support after the divorce. But he had signed that right away, traded it for another beer with his buddies. For the first time in 3 agonizing days, a real, genuine smile spread across my face. It felt foreign, but wonderful. Russell had signed his own financial death warrant 4 years ago, and he didn't even have the slightest clue. And Brenda. Oh, sweet, conniving Brenda. My mind flashed to her triumphant smile at the restaurant. She had seduced my husband, thinking he was her lottery ticket, her golden goose, her gateway to a comfortable life funded by my sweat and sacrifice. She thought she was about to cash in on half of my assets, a prize she believed she was owed. What a delicious, spectacular, and deeply satisfying irony. I grabbed my laptop, my mind suddenly sharp and clear. I started making a detailed list of my current net worth. The condo was now valued at least $400,000. My investment portfolio was just over $100,000. The startup stake was worth at least $50,000. I had $40,000 in liquid savings and a paid-off car worth $20,000. That was over $600,000. And that didn't even include my new salary of $16,000 a month, plus performance bonuses that could double that amount in a good quarter. Russell would continue making his $4,000 or $5,000 a month selling cars. Brenda didn't fall in love with my husband. She fell in love with my portfolio. And they had both made a fatal, ruinous miscalculation. They had no idea about the armor of ink I had wrapped around my life all those years ago. I took photos of every single page of the contract with my phone and emailed them to my lawyer, Corinne. The subject line was one word: found. 15 minutes later, even though it was nearly 4 a.m., she replied. Her message was short and sweet. Meredith. This changes everything. Call me the second you wake up. They have no idea what's about to hit them. The next morning, I woke up a different woman. The grief and shock were still there, simmering beneath the surface, but they were now overlaid with a new, powerful emotion: resolve. A cold, hard, diamond-like resolve. While drinking coffee in my sun-drenched kitchen, looking out at the Austin skyline, I finally saw their entire scheme with perfect clarity. Brenda's plan wasn't just an impulsive, passionate affair, it was a long, calculated game of greed. She saw Russell not as a partner, but as a crowbar, a tool to pry open the life I had built and take what she felt she was owed. And the dinner at the Gilded Steer, it wasn't a desperate, tearful confession. It was a performance. It was a carefully staged piece of theater designed to humiliate me, to break me down in the most public way possible so that I'd be too emotionally shattered to fight back during the divorce proceedings. They expected me to beg, to plead, to offer them anything to save my marriage. They expected a victim. They were about to be very, very disappointed. I called Corinne first thing, my voice steady and clear. Meredith, my girl, she said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. I've reviewed the scans you sent. This contract is a work of legal art. It's ironclad. Russell has no legal right to a single dime of your separate property. We can have this divorce finalized in 60 days if he doesn't contest it. And if he does contest it? I asked, already knowing the answer. On what grounds? She scoffed. He'd have to prove he was coerced or mentally incompetent when he signed it, which is impossible. He's screwed, Meredith. Plain, simple, and legally screwed. Screwed. He was screwed and he didn't even know it yet. A plan began to form in my mind, a plan for a second act to their little play, only this time, I would be the one directing. Corinne, I said, my voice low. I'm going to do something. I'm going to call them. I'm going to propose a civilized conversation about the divorce. There was a pause. Meredith, are you sure? It might be simpler and emotionally safer to just let me handle everything through official channels. I'm sure, I replied, a new hardness in my voice that I didn't recognize. They planned my public humiliation down to the last detail. I want to return the favor. I want to see their faces when they find out the truth. 3 long weeks passed. 3 weeks of my mother calling, trying to mediate, telling me to be the bigger person and think of the baby. Brenda had done a masterful job of painting me as the bitter, selfish sister who couldn't accept their true love. In the 4th week, when I knew they would be getting impatient and anxious about the money, I finally made the call. I called Brenda. She answered on the second ring, her voice breathless, as if she'd been waiting by the phone. Brenda, hi, I said, my voice carefully pitched to sound tired and resigned. Look, I've had a lot of time to think about this whole situation, and I think you guys are right. There's no point in holding a grudge. We're adults. These things happen. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end. This was not the reaction she was expecting. Really? She stammered. You're okay with this? I'm trying to be, I sighed, putting every ounce of my acting ability into it. I mean, you fell in love. It wasn't anyone's fault. And now there's the baby to think about. I was thinking, maybe we could meet to talk civilly about how to resolve everything without a big, messy fight. Just to settle things like adults. Her relief was so palpable I could feel it through the phone. Wow, Mare. That would be great. Russell will be so happy. He was so worried you were going to make a scene and drag this out. No scene, I said smoothly. Let's meet at the Gilded Steer again. Saturday night. Since that's where it all started. We can give it a new memory. A memory of closure. Perfect, she chirped, her voice bright with victory. I hung up the phone and a slow, cold smile spread across my face. Saturday night was going to be very, very interesting. I spent the next few days in a state of hyper-focused preparation. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a performance, and I was the star, director, and producer. I chose my outfit with surgical precision, an elegant, severe black dress made of a heavy crepe fabric that didn't wrinkle. It was powerful, understated, and screamed that I was in control. No jewelry, except for my simple diamond stud earrings. My hair was pulled back in a sleek, low ponytail. The message was clear, I meant business. I even practiced my expression in the mirror, a mask of calm resignation, perhaps a little sad around the eyes, but ultimately accepting. Corinne, my lawyer and friend, thought I was playing with fire. We had a long call the night before. Meredith, are you absolutely sure you want to do this yourself? She'd asked, her voice laced with concern. It could get ugly. He could get loud, aggressive. Let him, I told her, my voice steady. They deserve ugly. Besides, they're so busy planning how to spend my inheritance, they'll never suspect a thing. They think I'm a broken woman coming to beg for scraps from my own table. They're in for a surprise. I arrived at the Gilded Steer on Saturday, punctually at 8 o'clock. The hostess recognized me and her face fell with a flicker of pity. I gave her a small, tight smile. A table for 3, please. Under Wheeler. As she led me through the dining room, I requested the very same corner booth from that fateful night. The maitre d', a kind older man named Jean-Pierre, also recognized me and gave me a deeply sympathetic look. I hope tonight is a much happier occasion for you, ma'am, he said in a low voice. I have a feeling it will be, I replied, my voice smooth as silk. If only he knew. I sat there for 10 minutes, sipping a glass of ice water, observing the room. I felt strangely calm, my heartbeat slow and steady. The anger and grief were still there, but they had been forged into something else, something sharp and focused, like a weapon. Then, they arrived. Russell and Brenda walked in hand, and the entire atmosphere around them was different. They were relaxed, smiling, laughing together. They looked like a couple who had weathered a storm and had now come out into the sunshine, completely in love and ready to claim their prize. They were no longer nervous, they were triumphant. Brenda was wearing a soft pink maternity dress that was just tight enough to proudly accentuate her small but noticeable baby bump. They looked smug. They looked like they had one. Mare, Brenda said, leaning down to give me an air kiss next to my cheek, her perfume cloying and sweet. You look beautiful. So chic. Thank you, I said, my voice perfectly even. You both look, well. The pregnancy suits you, Brenda. It's been wonderful, she bubbled. We're already thinking of names. Russell is set on Michael if it's a boy, but I'm leaning towards Gabriel. Russell, playing the part of the doting future father, pulled out the chair for her, a chivalrous gesture he rarely bothered with for me in our 4 years of marriage. He sat down opposite me and gave me a look of practiced sincerity. Meredith, he said, his voice low and serious. Thank you for agreeing to do this, for talking like this, peacefully. I was afraid you would, you know. Make a scene? I finished for him, giving him that small, sad smile I had perfected. Don't be silly, Russell. We're all adults here, aren't we? We ordered the same expensive bottle of Cabernet as last time. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a steak knife. They thought this was their victory lap, the final negotiation where the vanquished foe gracefully surrenders the spoils of war. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. After the waiter had poured the wine and retreated, Russell cleared his throat, getting down to the business he was so eager to conclude. He leaned forward, placing his elbows on the table, adopting the earnest, sincere expression he used when he was trying to close a sale on a top-of-the-line Lincoln Navigator. "So, about the divorce," he began, exchanging a quick, confident glance with Brenda. It was clear they had rehearsed this. "We wanted to propose doing everything amicably. You know, no mess, no fuss. We think the fairest way is to just divide things right down the middle." I took a slow sip of my wine, watching him over the rim of the glass. "Go on," I said, my voice encouragingly soft. "Well," he continued, gaining momentum, "we can get the condo appraised and sell it, then split the proceeds, 50/50ths. The investments, too. We can just liquidate them and divide it all up. Simple." He sat back, a self-satisfied smile on his face. Brenda chimed in, her voice sweet and reasonable. "We think that's the only fair way, Mayor. You two built a life together, after all." "And," Russell added, his tone becoming a little more serious, "you know, with your new promotion and that fantastic new salary, we were thinking some temporary alimony would really help until I can get stabilized with Brenda and the baby. It would just be for a year or two, just to help us get on our feet." Alimony. He really believed, with every fiber of his being, that I was going to pay him alimony while he started a new life with my sister, raising their child. The sheer, unadulterated, breathtaking nerve of it was almost impressive. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. I slowly reached into my purse, my movements calm and deliberate. They both watched me, their eyes gleaming with anticipation, like two hungry wolves waiting for the kill. They probably thought I was pulling out a pen, ready to scribble my agreement on a cocktail napkin. Instead, my fingers closed around the thick, legal-sized envelope. I pulled it out and placed it on the table between us. The crisp, heavy paper made a dry, definitive thwack as it hit the dark wood. It was the only sound in a suddenly silent world. The sound of a guillotine blade dropping. "Before we talk about division," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, all traces of sadness gone, replaced by something cold and hard. "I need to clarify something very important that you both seem to have forgotten." Russell frowned, looking at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. "What is that?" he asked, his voice suddenly wary. "Our prenuptial agreement, Russell," I said, looking him directly in the eye, holding his gaze until he flinched. "Remember? The one you signed 4 years ago, in a lawyer's office, while you were nursing a hangover? The one you called rich people nonsense?" The color drained from his face so fast it was like watching a time-lapse video of a flower wilting. He went from a healthy tan to a pasty, sickly gray in a matter of seconds. Brenda looked from me to him, her brow furrowed in utter confusion. "What agreement?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "You made a prenuptial agreement?" "We did," I said, my gaze never leaving Russell's panicked face. "And he signed it without even bothering to read it." I pulled the pages out of the envelope and spread them on the table like a winning hand of poker, so they could both see. I pointed to the first bolded heading. Complete separation of assets. "Do you remember what that means, Russell? Or were you too busy checking your phone that day?" His hands were visibly trembling as he picked up the pages. His eyes darted frantically across the lines, trying to process the dense legal terms he had so arrogantly and foolishly ignored 4 years ago. "Now, hold on, Mayor," Brenda said, her voice losing its confident edge as she tried to take control of a situation that was rapidly spinning out of her grasp. "Even with some kind of agreement, you were married for 4 years. There's community property, division of assets acquired during the marriage. Not when there's a complete separation of assets, Brenda," I cut her off, my voice as sharp and clean as a surgeon's scalpel. I tapped my manicured finger on the specific clause on page 2. "It's right here. In black and white. Each spouse shall maintain individual ownership of all property owned prior to the marriage and all property acquired during the marriage. That means the condo, the investment portfolio, the stock options, everything I earned with my brain and my hard work, stays with me. This can't be legal." Russell finally exploded, his voice cracking and rising an octave. He slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware and drawing attention from the neighboring booths. The condo, the investments. I lived there. I contributed to the expenses. You contributed $300 a month for groceries and gas, Russell, I said calmly, my voice a low, steady counterpoint to his rising hysteria. I paid the $1,800 mortgage every month, on time, from my own bank account. I paid the $200 condo fees. I paid for the utilities, the internet, the insurance. Your $300 does not give you property rights over a $400,000 asset. That's not how math, or the law, works. Brenda was now frantically flipping through the pages, her eyes wild, her face pale, searching desperately for a loophole, a lifeline, some escape clause from the nightmare that was unfolding before her. But alimony, she shrieked, her voice thin and reedy. He has a right to alimony. You make so much more than him. I gave her a slow, cold smile. It didn't reach my eyes. An excellent point. Please turn to page 5, section 3. It's titled Spousal Support Waiver. Allow me to read it for you. Both parties hereby knowingly and voluntarily waive any and all rights to spousal support, alimony, or maintenance. Russell waived his right to alimony when he put his neat little signature on this line right here. I didn't know what I was signing, he yelled, his face contorted with a mixture of panic and impotent rage. You tricked me. This is a trick. I tricked you? I asked, my voice dangerously low. I leaned forward, the predator cornering its prey. Russell, you were a 30-year-old man sitting in a lawyer's office. She explained every single clause in plain English. You said, and I quote, yeah, makes sense. There are witnesses. It's all registered at the courthouse. It is as legal and as binding as the marriage vows you so casually threw away. The expression on Brenda's face was a slow-motion car crash of emotions. It morphed from confusion to disbelief to pure, unadulterated horror. The reality of their situation, the catastrophic failure of her grand plan, was finally hitting her like a freight train. You mean, he gets nothing? She whispered, the words barely audible, her dream of a comfortable life dissolving into thin air. Nothing, I confirmed, gathering the pristine pages and sliding them back into their envelope. Zero. Zilch. Nada. Russell leaves this marriage exactly as he entered it, with his financed pickup truck, his collection of polo shirts, and his own significant credit card debts. Russell buried his face in his hands, finally understanding the catastrophic scale of his miscalculation. Meredith, for God's sake, he pleaded, his voice muffled by his palms. We can talk about this. There has to be a way. You can't just leave me with nothing. I'm going to have a child to support. No, Russell, I said, my voice devoid of any sympathy as I emphasized each word. You are going to have a child to support. I leaned in again, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Which brings me to my next point. Child support. Brenda's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fresh terror. Child support? Of course, I said, feigning surprise at her ignorance. The father has a legal obligation to pay child support to the mother. Here in Texas, the guideline is typically 20% of the non-custodial parent's net income for one child. So let's do the math, shall we? I pulled up my phone and opened the calculator app, making a show of tapping in the numbers. You earn, what, $5,000 a month, gross? After taxes, that's about $3,800 net. 20% of that is $760. Every single month, Russell. That money will be coming out of your paycheck and going directly to Brenda. Every month, until your child turns 18. They stared at each other in stunned, panicked silence. They were partners in crime, and they were just now realizing that one of them was going to have to pay the other for their shared transgression for the rest of their lives. The irony was exquisite. Walking out of that restaurant for the second and final time was like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel into the bright sunlight. I didn't look back. I didn't feel sadness or anger anymore, just a profound, cleansing sense of liberation. In the parking lot, sitting in the quiet sanctuary of my car, I finally allowed myself a moment of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. They had tried to destroy me, and in the end, they had only managed to spectacularly destroy themselves. The divorce was finalized in exactly 62 days. Just as Corinne predicted, Russell didn't contest it. His lawyer, no doubt after one look at the ironclad prenup, had probably told him he didn't have a legal leg to stand on. And with the dead weight of that toxic marriage officially and legally cut away, my life didn't just recover, it skyrocketed. It was as if all the energy I had been pouring into that failing relationship was suddenly redirected into my own life, my own ambitions. I poured everything I had into my new role as commercial director. I didn't just meet my targets, I shattered them. In my first 6 months, I secured a partnership that was the largest in the company's history. I was flying to London, to Tokyo, making deals and building a name for myself. The performance bonuses that came with that success were staggering. My monthly income, in some periods, soared past $20,000. The tech startup I was a partner in landed a new round of funding, tripling the value of my stake overnight. My net worth crossed the $1 million mark before my 30th birthday. That October, I sold the condo we had shared. The moment the sale closed, I felt a final sense of release. It was cleansing, like shedding an old skin. I sold it for $500,000, making a tidy profit, and bought a new place, a stunning, 2-story loft in a downtown high-rise with a private terrace that had a breathtaking view of Lady Bird Lake. I paid the $700,000 in cash. I then hired a top interior designer and spent another $200,000 renovating it from top to bottom, turning it into my dream home, a sleek German kitchen, a private gym, a home office with a panoramic view of the city where I could build my empire. My new home was so spectacular it was featured on the cover of Austin Home and Design magazine. At 30, I had achieved the American dream, entirely on my own terms. I traveled to Europe 3 times that year: Paris, Rome, Barcelona. Always alone, always first class, always staying in the best hotels. I bought myself a classic Cartier watch, not because I needed to know the time, but because I could. I dined at Michelin-starred restaurants. I shopped without looking at price tags. The loneliness I thought I would feel, the emptiness I had dreaded, never came. After the searing sting of betrayal, the profound peace of solitude was almost addictive. I didn't have to explain my choices or justify my expenses to anyone. My life was finally, completely, my own. I started therapy, not out of sadness, but for growth. My therapist, an incredible woman named Dr. Chen, helped me unpack not just the betrayal, but the years of toxic family dynamics I had mistaken for love. "Meredith," she said in one session, her voice gentle but firm, "you grew up believing you had to be the provider for everyone around you. Your sister, your parents, your ex-husband. When was the last time someone truly took care of you?" The question was so simple, yet it broke me open. I cried for 15 minutes straight. I had always been the problem solver, the responsible one, the fixer. It was time to put myself first, to discover who I was when I wasn't propping up other people's lives. And that's exactly what I did. Through the inevitable grapevine of family, mostly my mother's worried, whispered phone calls, I followed the slow-motion car crash of Russell and Brenda's new life from a safe, sterile distance. It was exactly as I had predicted, a perfect storm of their own making. The economy took a slight downturn that year, and the market for luxury cars softened. Russell's commission-based salary, which had been precarious even in the best of times, plummeted. According to my mother, he was barely clearing $3,500 a month. After the court-ordered child support of $760 was automatically deducted from his paycheck each month, there was very little left for him to live on, let alone support a new family. Brenda had their baby, a little girl they named Holly. Their dream of a comfortable family life in Austin was the first casualty. They couldn't afford a 2-bedroom apartment, so Brenda and the baby moved back home with our parents in their small, 2-bedroom house in San Antonio. Our parents, who were retired and living on a fixed income, were now supporting 3 adults and an infant on my father's meager pension. The financial and emotional strain on them was immense. Russell tried to get a transfer to a dealership in San Antonio to be closer to them, but nothing was available. So, he made the grueling, soul-crushing hour-and-a-half commute each way, every single day, in his gas-guzzling pickup truck. He was burning through gas money he couldn't afford, leaving before dawn and getting home long after the baby was asleep. He seemed so tired lately, so defeated, my mother would tell me, her voice full of a sympathy I could not muster. And Brenda is trying to find more freelance clients, but it's so hard with a newborn. Eventually, the pressure cooker situation at my parents' house became untenable. Russell and Brenda moved out, not into a nice starter home or even a decent apartment, but into a rented single-wide trailer in a rundown park on the dusty outskirts of San Antonio. $500 a month for a tiny, cramped metal box with thin walls and a leaky roof. It was all they could afford. My mother said they fought constantly. Vicious, ugly fights about money. He blamed her for pushing for the divorce so aggressively, for being so blinded by greed that she never considered the possibility of a legal document like a prenup. She blamed him for being a lousy salesman, for losing his good job at the Lincoln dealership due to his poor performance, for not being able to provide them with the life she felt she was owed. The grand, all-consuming love that had justified their betrayal had curdled into bitter, daily resentment and blame. It turned out their great passion couldn't survive the harsh reality of a shared bank account that was perpetually overdrawn. Brenda sent me a few desperate, rambling messages in the middle of the night, messages that evolved from half-hearted, self-serving apologies to direct pleas for money. "Mare, I know I messed up, but Holly is your niece. She's an innocent child. Can't you at least help with her doctor's bills? Russell's new job at the used car lot doesn't pay enough. We can't cover everything." I read them, a strange sense of detachment washing over me, and then I blocked her number for good. Her choices were not my emergency. 2 years after that night at the steakhouse, my life was unrecognizable in the best possible way. I was now an executive director at my company, a position that came with a salary of $300,000 a year and a level of professional respect I had once only dreamed of. My net worth had sailed past the $2 million mark. More importantly, I had found a real partner. I met Daniel at an art gallery opening. He was a successful architect, a kind, intelligent man with a quick laugh and a quiet confidence. He had his own successful firm, his own ambitions, his own life. Our relationship wasn't built on need or dependency, it was built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine partnership. We were 2 whole, independent people choosing to build something new and beautiful together. There was no financial imbalance, no hidden resentments, no games. "You have an impressive strength and resilience that's incredible," he told me one night as we were having dinner on my terrace, the lights of the Austin skyline twinkling below us. "But you also have an inner peace that's very rare." He was right. I had finally found a profound peace, a peace that came from knowing exactly who I was, what I had survived, and what I deserved. I no longer needed anyone's approval. I no longer felt the crushing, lifelong obligation to support people who only took from me. Family, I had learned, isn't just about blood. It's about who truly celebrates your wins, who respects your boundaries, and who supports your well-being. My assistant, Simone, who had become a close friend, and my lawyer, Corinne, were more family to me in those years than Brenda had ever been. On the 3rd anniversary of the betrayal, a day I no longer marked with sadness but with a quiet sense of gratitude for the freedom it had brought me, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Russell. "Meredith, I know you have no reason to ever want to talk to me again, but I need to say something. You were right. You were right about everything. About me, about Brenda, about the money. I was a weak, foolish man and I destroyed the best thing I ever had in my life. I hope you're happy. You deserve it." Reading that message didn't bring me a surge of satisfaction or a flare of anger. It just brought a quiet, final sense of closure. He had finally understood the magnitude of what he had lost, but it was years too late. I had moved on so completely, had built a life so full and rich, that his apology was like a letter addressed to a person who no longer existed, a ghost from a past life. I looked at the message for a moment, took a deep breath, and then I deleted it without responding. Today, I look back at that horrible night at the Gilded Steer and I see it for what it truly was, the best gift life could have ever given me. It was a painful, brutal, and necessary catalyst. It forced me to discover the depth of my own strength. It taught me that my dignity and my self-respect are non-negotiable. My story isn't about revenge. It's about justice. It's about the profound and liberating lesson that when you finally stop propping up people who only want to use you, you have so much more energy, so much more strength, left to build something truly extraordinary for yourself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a difficult journey, but one that ultimately led me to a place of strength and peace I never thought possible. I'm curious, have any of you ever had a moment in your life where you discovered your own strength only after a major betrayal? Let me know your story in the comments below. And if you found my story compelling, please give this video a like and subscribe for more.